Hi there, everyone. Welcome. We are going to wait maybe a minute or so just as people are joining us. So definitely get settled in your seat. If you are having any trouble hearing me right now, definitely put something in the chat window or raise your hand. We'll definitely help you out. So Rob, I'm very excited about today's webinar. We were just, before we hopped on here, we were just talking about data in the good old days of direct mail, which kind of brought tears to my eyes. That direct mail was kind of a love-hate relationship. If any of you out there joining us today can relate to that direct mail, definitely raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, what are your thoughts on direct mail?
It's where I started my career at the Tribune Company, and used to manage some of my big clients at the time were grocery and in automotive. So I got to know the ins and outs of all the secrets at the grocery stores very quickly, and how to try to get people to look up or down as they go down the aisle.
Yeah, I definitely miss the days that once you sent out that mailer, that was it. Unless somebody responded back to you, that's about all you could do with your data, other than cleaning up the returns. But things got more sophisticated, and here we are. More data, and that's what we're talking about today. So, hi everybody. My name is Vanu Deschetti. I'm with EVA, the event management platform. We're excited to host these webinars. We love sharing what we've learned along the way and hearing from you all and learning from all of you as well, and bringing on guest speakers who are experts in their own in their own industries as well. Just a couple of housekeeping tips before we get started. This session does qualify for one continuing education credit hour through CAE with ASAE, as well as CMP credits with the Events Industry Council, and also CEM credits with IAEE. We definitely want to make sure you get those. So if you stay with us for the entire hour, we'll send you an email confirming your attendance, and then do all of the paperwork that we need to do to get you those hours. So if you run into any technical difficulties, we've got Alexis joining us today. She's one of our Zoom techs that we have for virtual experiences. Hi, Alexis. Thank you so much for helping us out today. She's here to help you, so definitely let us know how we can help. Now, we love to get your questions, any thoughts, any concerns. Put them in the chat. Share your stories with us along the way. I'm going to try to get to your questions as we see them and as it's relevant to the conversation. We'll definitely have some time at the end for additional questions. All right, that's enough of the housekeeping. Rob, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Vanu.
So today we're going to be talking about how first-party data fits into organizations. But before we do that, let's hear more about who you are. What I think is great is that you are not only a data person, an IT person, and an association person, but you also come from the world of meetings. You were formerly with PCMA, and you were the let me make sure I got this, Chief Innovation Officer as well as Administrative Officer?
That's correct. And it was that was during my second stint. As Sheriff Karamat, who's the current CEO, said, I had a momentary lapse in judgment when I decided to leave from joining there the first time, where I ran the sales team, but worked on the data development of the organization and how to kind of evolve that into actually many of the topics that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I can only imagine PCMA being an international organization of how complex the data is there.
Yeah, and it's funny though, because I departed PCMA in January, and worked with a variety of organizations, and a common theme is that the organizations are very rich in content and want to take advantage of platforms like EVA, whether big or small, the $1 billion to the $1 million organization. The interesting thing is the formula is actually the same, and so it's the way to use data to create a customer-centric organization, to design for the customer experience, doesn't change, and really what does change and evolves is the technology, which is a passion of mine. And I'm a self-declared data geek, along with a data evangelist, but always looking at what platforms are out there, how do they fit in, and how do you take advantage of today's best in class, and that's, it's not always an easy thing, because there's a lot of platforms out there that where they might reskin the front. It's, how they manage the data, how the data can be used, how that impacts the customer experience is actually paramount to the growth of the organization. And as we'll get into, because it is as I think is COVID at least truly pressed on this fact, is, in the digital world with an event management platform, the value of events actually increasingly became more important for that interaction, because it is an outlet for people who, if you can or cannot make it in person. But I think what really was important and shined through was, it's actually no longer about just the event itself. It's no longer about the 3 or 4 or 5 days that event might occur. It's about that continuous engagement in how are you using your event management platform for that pre, during, and post event engagement.
Well, before we get started with the topic and the presentation today, I do want to hear from our participants, our guests today. Alexis, can you throw up that first poll that we have? We want to know who we have in the room, because I think this topic really touches different types of roles, different positions within an organization. So I want to see who we have joining us today. Are you, how tech savvy are you? Are you a techie who, you've got data just well under control, and we probably have a few things to learn from you? Are you a techie that's, you're doing a pretty good job, and one day you're hoping to be that data king, queen? And then, or are you a meeting planner and you're just, if you're like me, doing duplication of effort and just want to figure out a way to be smarter about the data? Or, and then different types here. So let's see who we have here, and there's no, and it's going to help us guide our conversation today. And it looks like, Rob, we have a lot of planners with us today, and I'm glad that you guys aren't scared of the data piece, and you're willing to learn more, because I think it's more and more becoming part of our daily lives. So great. And if you are unsure other, we'd like to hear from you. Put down in the chat if you're comfortable with sharing with us. Kind of tell us where your comfort level is with data. Okay. Alexis, why don't we share this with everyone so they know who their fellow viewers are? So great. Okay. All righty. So now, Rob, we know kind of where to guide this conversation, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, this is great. It's being relevant, just as we said, is everything in life. So making sure that we're speaking the language is spot on.
Great. All right. So Rob, when we started to, when we first talked about this topic and wanted to share kind of our thoughts on data with the world, what are some of your key observations that you're seeing right now with organizations, specifically in the events world? How are you seeing people use their data?
It's kind of funny. It might actually be flipped. The question might be flipped, and is how are we seeing organizations not use data? And what I am seeing is that while there's a lot of data pouring into either a face-to-face, but more importantly, the collection opportunity in the digital environment is plentiful, and it's far more data than we ever had access to traditionally. And I always joke around is when people, pre-COVID, when people would show up to the events and they'd see a beacon on their registration badge, and they would take it off because they didn't want to be tracked. The evolution of events has really actually turned into one of the richest data collection opportunities possible. But what I'm seeing is that while all this data is sitting in a platform, number one, all platforms are not created equal. They don't offer the tools to understand the audience, and they don't actually create tools to make the insights actionable. And first and foremost, I think it's that inventory checklist of if you're hosting an event, if you're about to, if you just host an event, really inventory what do you have available to you now to help you understand or tell that story. Because really, data science, data management, they sound very technical, they sound very formal, but really at the end of the day, what the data does is it provides an opportunity to tell a story, and we want to tell a very simple story that people understand, because it's going to guide every part of the organization. It's going to guide technology in the type of integrations and cleansing and ongoing data management. It's going to guide membership organizations in terms of how do we better retain our audience when we need to keep the constant flow of relevant content flowing in front of our members, mirroring that type of person to find acquisition opportunities, event registration, learning opportunities from the type of content that might align with the product, the education product they have internally. So it's really where so many people think when they hear data or they hear very specific terms, it might just reside with a particular part of the organization. It is actually the best best organizations and the ones that I think offer that ability to grow at the fastest pace are the ones where every department embraces it one way or the other. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to have a course in statistics to understand what they need to do to manipulate it, but it does mean just having that basic understanding is really important.
Yeah. So let's actually maybe as a starting point, talk about what you mean when you say first party data for those that, I find that can be a technical term. What is first party data?
So in the terms of data, there's the bookends are really your first party data and your third party data. Second party data is in there, but it's less common. But starting back in 5-10 years ago, there was a term everyone heard, and it was big data. And it was a really important term because it meant that you had access to all these insights that you couldn't otherwise use to help grow your business. Companies that are big data providers are names that you might have heard of, like Axiom, Experian. In the initial days, later translated into Google and Facebook, would be big data providers, meaning they aggregate data from a lot of different sources. But really, as the world evolves, as privacy regulations have continued to increase, as Apple last year decided that with their release 2 years ago, 14.5 operating system, that if you open up an app and you have Apple, you can ask the app not to track you. All these changes in the marketplace came, and what that means is that people who utilize this data through other companies all of a sudden had less control. They had less ability to gain insights on their audience, which means that they had less ability to convert, into actionable items. So then the term first party data became very important. And first party data can be as simple as your Christmas card list. It's an Excel file that you own the data on there, its names and addresses. To your membership list is first party data. To your event registration list is first party data. To someone that purchased an education product, that's all first party data. It means that someone has given you a piece of information. They've opted in to allow you to communicate back with them, and you use that information to help kind of set that foundation for a good customer experience. And in defining customer experience, it's as simple as someone comes to you, what their interests are, what they like, And often you gain those initial data points through an application or an event registration, and then later, through an event management platform, you actually gain significant insights because you're actually able to understand whether it's an education track, whether it's based on a conversation they had online in a community environment, but you begin to shape and understand what that audience wants, and it associates back to the data that you own. And so it allows you to go down that path of this is the type of audience that we have. These are their likes and interests, and we want to be able to serve up relevant content to them at a point in time. And that can be, that can go a lot of different ways, but really is the foundation is trying to take and build your own database and not being reliant on others.
Thank you for that. So now we've got our first party data, but I've been doing this for a while and working with associations and nonprofits and looking where that data lies within the organization. And I see a movement happening, but I think traditionally associations are siloing their data. Their first party data, there's the event data that lives with the events and meetings department. There's the education data, people that are taking courses in LMS or the certifications, and they're in this silo. And then you've got the membership data and then the sales data. It seems very segmented. And I'm seeing in the industry that now there's this movement to, wait a minute, there's relationships to be built between these different silos. And I think that's what you're going to be talking to us a little bit more today. What's kind of your philosophy on all of it?
Absolutely. And if we had a couple hours, we could get deep into it, and it would love to always happy to continue the conversation outside this, but it is, you touched on a really important point, because in a perfect world, everyone's going to exist in one platform, and every conversation, every transaction, every piece of content they read would reside in one, but that isn't the case. Because you have events, you have learning management, you have the CRM, the content platform, all these different. And what's important is that structure of data to allow you to take what someone does in a different platform and apply those learnings within the whole ecosystem. And you have to think about it as, and I guess you don't have to, but my personal preference is that, content is such a natural way of defining behavior, and behavior is everything. And I joke around that sometimes I say that static data is dead, because the minute that something about someone, and that, let's just as an example, is that someone wanted to learn a piece of information about event safety, protocols. That was very relevant 2 years ago, and it's marked in their profile, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's relevant today. And so the way that you stay current with people, the way that you stay current with your audience is using the content that you're producing to gauge that engagement and come along with them in a journey. And in some ways you're leading them because you're presenting the type of content that they're consuming, and you want to present like content because it, the relevancy is, it will make an engagement rate of 20% go to 50 to 70 to 80%, to as they're evolving, particularly in their career, and in the past couple of years, how many job changes have there been? How many career changes, where that they may be still within an industry, but because the pool of applicants of people who are working has shrunk, people have taken on more roles. So you have to think about this in a very, very strategic way, that how do we understand our audience in the most effective way possible, defined by their own actions, and not go old school where you hire a consultant to build you 7 personas, but you use these interactions in platforms like EVA to be able to define who they are, what their interests are, what their likes are, and then begin that customer journey for them to grow with you, as opposed to you either not growing, you either not being relevant to them anymore, or thinking you're on track and just kind of missing the mark on the type of content they want to consume.
Yeah. Now you've brought some great slides to share with us today. And the first one, Alexis, if we can throw up there, is just some of the points you want to make today. Can you just kind of guide us through it when we, at the end of the day, end of the webinar, what you hope to share with us?
Yeah, and these are foundational points, I think, just because let's think of it from the journey of start to end, and at first it's you have to be informed. You have to be informed of how can you leverage your first party data to grow the event, even before the event starts. What are just some very easy to consume milestones around that. Then we have to think about, to the point of there is not a single system. But what is the benefit of integrating a event management tech stack into the overall organization's tech stack? How does it interact with the LMS, with the CMS, with the CRM? And then, really, and I think everyone on this call has likely been involved in an integration of some sort where you had this grand vision of how it was going to work. And then it kind of falls flat in one way or the other. At the end of the day, the consumer might not have any idea of what that is, but to really maximize on understanding the experience and how to apply that information for down the line engagement, really lies in just a few basic things around integration. And then let's talk about a few ideas, a checklist, if you will, on how we're going to use the data collected during an event to keep that audience engaged. And there's benefits beyond what people might realize. But if we think about what might be on the top of many people's minds here, and that's monetization of an event, we have to think beyond the 3, 4, 5 days of that. How do we, a common question often asked when I was at PCMA, how many people are attending the event? It's a tricky question, particularly when everything went digital, because in a sponsor or advertiser's mind, they're thinking about the value of how many people can I reach in a very finite period of time. But they're not thinking about it actually in the life cycle of their own marketing and sales cycle, because quite often, as everyone knows, a product is never sold on a single event. And so we have to think about, the world of monetization. We have to think of the world as educational development and career development in chunks of times, not singular events. And so what is the framework to maximize that post-event? Right.
And I like where you're going with our next slide here, that you're talking about growing your event. And, it's really interesting. And I think you hit it on the nose. We all want to know how to grow our events. How do we get more attendees? But the real question, if you really dive in deep, is how do I increase my revenue? How do I make sure I've got the right people there that my exhibitors and sponsors want to meet and do business with? And so the question is just not as flat as just grow my attendance. And so I think you've got some great advice for us here. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah, and the first one is, if statistically speaking, if anyone goes, if you measure the traffic, and I bet this would be the case for most people here, what's the most visited page? What are the top 2 visited pages of any sort of event? And it tends to be 1, the schedule, and 2 is who else is attending the event, and it's really important to focus on first pre-event the schedule, and particularly as they dive into the speakers and the educational tracks. What are they consuming? What's of interest to them? And there's a variety of tools that you can use to understand this, but the one-to-many era of trying to market the event isn't effective anymore. So you have to really discern what is the particular track that someone's interested in coming to you for, and then when you begin that outbound messaging, and emails always a primary form of that messages for people. Making sure you touch on what's important to them, and if they're in your ecosystem, if they've had recent interactions, leverage the data that you already have, because there's no better way to do that. In the environment that you don't have a piece of data on somebody, today cookies are at some point a tracking device. A tracking piece of code that can follow people off your site and serve relevant messages, that's still very much a part of the ecosystem today. That kind of gets into the second point is, don't place a single piece of code on the site and then just message everyone with the same message, whether it's the general session speaker or a few other very key things to your messaging to your event, but deliver the message where people consume content, but segmented by the pages that they visited. So whether it's, broadly speaking, someone's interested in the technology versus the logistics of your ecosystem, that's really important. When I was at PCMA, actually, we were deploying this exact strategy, and we had the unfortunate luck to be hosting community leaders right when Omicron started surging in Vegas. But by taking on this strategy, there were a couple key things that we learned about the audience. And one was what part of the audience was very, very concerned about the health and safety of attending events versus who was really still very focused on the education and the type of education they were going to get versus the type of people that just wanted networking. And when we created those different levels of segmentation, leveraging the ad networks that talk outside your walls, we actually increased in that last 4 weeks attendance by 25%, which is incredible. We exceeded our own expectations. But what we quickly saw was that our engagement went sky high by really focusing in on a micro set of messages, because we were speaking that one-to-one. And then, while I love email is great. If you get a 30% open rate, you're missing 70% of your audience, which means you do have to take advantage of whether it's social marketing, whether it's LinkedIn marketing, whether it's the ad networks that connects to all the other sites. Really important, because it's not a one size fit all.
It's no longer the direct mail that you send out, the save the date, the 8 weeks, the 4 weeks. Yeah, it's no longer that.
Exactly. And the advantage of that, though, is nothing's permanent in digital. The only thing that's permanent is if you make a funny post, that becomes a permanent record in someone's Twitter feed. But the best is you measure it in real-time engagement. And if something's working, you double down. If something's not working, and again, the common theme here is data, and which leads into the third point, is using that data-driven insights to really up your planning. And again, it's not, I don't want people to feel like you need a degree in data science or statistics here, because the easier and the fewer buckets, at least in the beginning, that you can make it to understand, the more successful you're going to be. And start with education tracks, start with the networking, and just begin to measure where people are going. Again, after this call, if people have other questions about some of these other strategies that feed into the event, happy to connect, because they're things that are affordable. They're things that are simple enough that any organization could take it on, and they effectively grow your event platform.
Rob, we do have a question. Angela, before I get to your question, I did want to throw up one more poll. Just to get a sense where everybody's philosophy is. I don't believe there is a right or wrong philosophy, so don't be shy in answering this. Just basically, where do you think the event data, should it be integrated within your organization, or is it better to leave your event data alone? So while we're doing that poll and getting everyone to put in their opinion there, Rob, Angela is asking about specific examples about consuming the content. Are we talking about external versus internal locations? Can you talk a little bit more about that, giving some examples of that?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about messaging and Alexis, if you don't mind just posting, I put an example of an external platform. I sent you an example of an external platform. Not to get all, I've thrown a lot of acronyms out there. I'm going to throw one more. An example would be something called a DSP, which stands for Demand Side Platform, which means that you have this example, and a Stack It app would be an example of a demand side platform where you have the ability to place a code on your site for building digital audiences. But you also have that ability to upload your own data into a platform like Stack It app, where it then matches back to the audience. And as an example, if I go to CNBC, I would see a very targeted message if I put it out there. If I went to my local media site, Chicago Tribune, I would see, you can follow and send people messages, the Food Network, the Weather Channel. There's the endless ability to be able to go to serve messages where your audience is. It's paramount today. And if it's as simple as, if you have an email address, you can upload that, you can match it back to their device IDs, and you can serve targeted messaging on those device IDs. If you don't have their email address, placing a code on it so you can follow them off and send them messages, it's very simple. Happy to dive into that one more, but that's the example of where, you've got email, you've got social media, where those same tactics, if you have an email address, you can send targeted messaging through social media, LinkedIn, and then a DSP would be the other platform that I recommend. That would give you total market coverage or omni-channel coverage, things like that, where you're meeting your audience where they consume content.
Great, thank you for that, Rob. All right, Alexis, let's share the results of this last poll. Meeting planners, I can't blame you for holding on to your data. I get you, but I also see the value of what you can get, and that's a little bit about what we're trying to do today, is share with you the value you get with looking at integrating that data into the rest of your ecosystem there. So let's get into that, Rob, in terms of integrating the event technology. What are things, why should we do it? Why is it a good thing?
It's as simple as it increases your visibility to your audience, and if we think about a term that's very relevant to today, and it's just because of the technology is there, is everything is real time. You go out, you search for something, you want instant results back. It has to be the same on our side too. We have to have that real-time insights into what our visitors, what our attendees, what our members want, so we can respond to them in real time, and we can continue to be relevant. Because there are a couple of very real truths in life. One is that there's a lot of content out there in the sea of the internet. And so, with people's time being starved for attention, serving someone that content in a timely manner, in the type of content that they want to see, is really important. So that's kind of the first thing, is collect the data about your attendees and visitors. The second is, as we think about an integration and we talk about the ability to use this data to improve future events, we think about what content did people visit a lot, how much time did they spend on site, versus the alternative that what you thought was going to be wildly popular, the abandonment rate may have been at 30% of the actual written or video content or live content, and being able to absorb that for saying that, maybe there's a whole new segment of our audience that we weren't even aware of, and understanding, and there's a lot of things that we can talk about afterwards, but understanding, perhaps even digging in, why did someone abandon a piece of content so quickly that may have had a significant effort being put into it. It's likely to cover insights into your audience that you weren't aware, and I always look at things like that as an opportunity to actually expand your audience, because it gives you that exact question to go back to them and say, hey, not the traditional 48 question post-event poll, but reaching out and saying 3 questions. We saw you exhibit this behavior and we want to improve your experience. So we're asking for just 3 simple questions, and that will likely open up a business insight that has a whole new track of growth, and that will impact your future decisions in a very positive way. And then, when we think about extending the life of an event for months beyond the engagement, the amount of interactions, the amount of content, the attention span, the ability to actually absorb all that information in such a small period of time is actually an impossibility. And so we think we use that to say that, let's just say someone did an education track, and for simplicity arguments, there were 10 pieces of content in there. And let's just say that someone properly absorbed 2 of those pieces of content. Think about one of the greatest challenges a marketing department has is, what is the content that we're going to come up with to continuously engage this individual and bring them back into our ecosystem? Because you want to be relevant on a continuous basis. You don't want to give them the opportunity to have a question and go somewhere else with that question. And so if you think about this, in organizations, so many organizations have such a library of content that's so valuable, but they don't think about cataloging it. For just a very simple term is they didn't consume these 8 pieces. How could every single week, how could we prod them to continue their learning journey, and how can we make it relevant to them, to their organizations, to helping them grow throughout the year? Because most certainly every piece of content does have a shelf life on it. It's rare that something is timeless, but it certainly has relevancy for the next 6 to 12 months. And if we think about cycles of events, whether it's an annual or semi-annual event, the big to the mid-year event, perhaps, you need that path to keep someone engaged. And this is a very simple, leaving that trail of breadcrumbs behind to say that this is the audience, this is what they want to consume. Because I'll tell you, when I've been a part of these, I could provide endless case studies that this formula will mean that you have an open rate of maybe 30-40% on a good day in emails. But if you can just start aligning the content, and we're not even actually getting into the tool set of how to do it, just the concept, you'll recognize engagement rates of around 70% on an average day, because you understand who they are and what they want.
Yeah. And Rob, I think it's a hot topic. We're often talking to, especially scientific, medical, pharma organizations, that they're coming together for a conference, whether it's in person, hybrid, or virtual. They're coming together. They're getting such great content, connecting this brain trust around content. And they all walk away going, we want more. We want to connect with these people. And that's where the engagement piece comes in. Mm-hmm. And, and I think everyone is getting savvier, saying, it's just not hosting the recorded sessions. That's the engagement. There needs to be more. let's start looking at doing regional meetings, and let's start doing, whether it's virtual talks, but let's connect these people that have the same interest in mind. And I think these tools allow planners and organizations to really figure out what is that content, who is wanting that engagement, instead of just saying, oh, let's just talk about the entire conference, because that can be overwhelming. But now you've got this data to really pinpoint what their interests are, who wants to do that, and that's great. We do have a question here. This is a little off topic of the integration, but I want to make sure we get to David, who's asking this question, and it's around privacy. It's GDPR has us all scared to make sure that we're following on the right things, and we want to do that because we are the stewards of our members and our registrants and attendees of their data. So we want to make sure that we're doing all that we can. But how do you get around that? Like if someone says, we want to only collect what's necessary, but we need this additional information as an organization to know more about that to that person. So how do we deal with that? So
I mean, through your privacy policies, and when somebody is signing up for something, you always have they're always opting in to a set of communications, and I always I advise to be as transparent and as short formed as possible on how you use that data, because it's going to enable a level of trust with your audience, that they know that you're not just turning it around and selling it to the first bidder. Also, offering the opportunity to opt out of any communications is critical. I think you'd be surprised, is the more relevant you are to someone, you will see opt-out rates drop quite significantly, because people they'll want to continue to hear from you. But what in terms of access to your data, I will say this: there's always a varying level of how much access you give someone to a data. Even if you have in your privacy policy that you're going to expose your database to certain key partners. I'm of the mindset that data is your digital currency. It is what is most unique to your organization, because you actually are producing content, which is an asset, that what people are consuming. You're building a profile about a person. You want to be very careful in about who you give direct access to versus who you grant access to in that too. And that's a really important part, because if you are jumping back on the monetization, there is nothing wrong with selling sponsorships and ads. Being more relevant is helpful. So understanding that if they're a technology person, providing more technology type ads or solutions that speaks to the relevancy, but controlling the access points of that data is often the most ironclad thing that you can do, and it's good for your business.
And David, there are also, and this goes back to the third party. So once you have your first party data that's in-house, you can always augment or supplement that those data records by third-party tools that can match up based on identifiers, whether it's the name, email, or organization. And you can then enhance the data that you have. But that's for a third party. You probably have in-house data that's just not connecting with one another. That's going to give you valuable insights as well. And we'll get into that, I think, with the integration conversation that you're going to have here in a minute. But Angela also has a question here, and it's in our Q&A. Rob, if you want to take a look at it, and it has to do with 2 layers of decision makers. Since our audience, their audience predominantly has their registrations paid for by their organization. Sounds like an IMEX deal. Hey, if you guys are going to IMEX, let me know. Raise your hand. Love to see you there. But so let's side note. Sorry, Angela, back to you. You've got 2 layers of decision makers. You've got the budget owners, and then you've got the individual practitioners. Do you have, and I guess you're asking here, just examples of how you keep that data, I think. Is that the question that, or what's your experiences with having those two different levels in a database? Any experience with that? Because I think PCMA they do hosted buyer programs and things like that.
They do, and just you know, and I think just the most important part is, and you know, this is it can be a very complicated discussion, but transparency and if someone is signing up for something, that they will receive a barrage of emails or meeting requests or you know, very targeted items, setting that expectation up front, in that this is how your data is going to be used, in addition to what is foundational, and that's providing you the best experience possible. That's really the key there, you know. And then in every communication that goes out, providing a very easy way for someone to opt out the minute that they want to stop, you know, that's also mission critical, because if it's not easy for someone to stop these messages, that's where you're going to hear from somebody.
And Angela, thank you for the clarification there. And it's about the content's relevance and priorities for those two different audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
great. So let's jump into integrations, because Rob, almost everyone we talk to that wants to use EVA wants to do some kind of integration. I've had requests as many as 7 integrations, and when we're happy to do them. It's something that we do well at. It's our core competency, but we really get down into asking the question of why and what the purpose is and how is it going to work. And sometimes we work ourselves out of doing those integrations. But I'd like to hear from you in terms of, like, what are some do's and don'ts, and what are some basic things we should know about integrating other platforms into our event tag? Yeah,
and so, you know, foundationally is, so oftentimes in an organization, if someone is taking the lead on an integration, and I'm gonna, coming from the technology side, I'm gonna pick on technology, where sometimes we live in somewhat of a silo where we believe that we know what everyone else wants and their needs are. But the reality is, you know, often what's important to a technology person is vastly different than membership versus events versus education, even versus finance, you know, how finance is supposed to see it. And so we have to think about the internal teams and what everyone's going to want to see. But in particular, what are their pain points? What didn't they get from a previous event, which may have turned into a very manual process of either extracting a spreadsheet, having to manually enter something in, having maybe 2 different sources of information being, you know, sourced into a platform where it suddenly duplicated information. So the first is just, I mean, I always advocate a super user team across an organization, a simple representative from each part of the business, to share and actually map out what the pain points are. Really important. You will avoid hours and probably weeks of pain by taking this simple step. The second is let's think about the roadmap of the user experience online versus on site. This is really important, and Venu and I were talking about a key stat that talks about you know, the online experience, creating the fear of missing out of what's actually happening on site, and using that to drive, you know, not only higher digital attendance but also on site attendance in future events. But the most important thing is really putting some thought behind, whether they are on site or online, what is the one user experience? You know, because in today's day and age, as we're all sitting here in the webinar and we're all over the United States and perhaps outside the United States, we want everyone to be able to consume the content, learn from it, and be able to benefit from it from the same way. So we have to think about the events in in that same way. And then in terms of defining key platform integrations, and who are the stakeholders, what do they want to get out of it? Because if it's content planning, if it's understanding what worked really well and what didn't, that's going to be different than I want to grow my membership from this. I want to understand what people consumed, and I want to deliver more relevant messages and perhaps content they didn't consume to say, if you like that, a membership benefit is that you get access to all this same type of content that you consumed, versus a finance team is going to have a whole separate integration and need in terms of determining, revenue by category, profitability, post-event reporting, so they're all very different. So in before doing this, defining those integrations and those key stakeholders, but not just blankly saying, I want all my platforms connected to it, because you're going to spend a lot of time for probably little benefit, and perhaps even a lot more on the cost of integration than what you really need to.
I love that, Rob, bringing everyone together to talk about really what the pain point is. Because sometimes we can assume that we know what the problem is, but to actually hear it from that department and to workshop that out together and coming up with a solution, it's not only the smart way to do it, like to understand what the problem is, but also to get everyone's buy-in and make everyone in the organization feel as if they're empowered and have a voice in this process to adopt it for later. So awesome. So let's move on to the content lives on, and it's much more than just putting a recording on a site. Now, I get, I'm an advocate of doing what you can do. I know that we're all strapped for time and just I was going to say manpower resources and woman power resources of trying to do all of the follow-up that's required. But talk to us a little bit about some of your other ideas going beyond just hosting a video recording.
And this is actually my favorite part. So I love that we're ending on this topic, because this emphasizes the point that, post-event, you're walking away with probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of rows of rich data the first one is remind people of their experience, remind them of how valuable it was by coming to your event, and in a very simple format. Just, I'll give you a non-event related example is I subscribe to Grammarly, and every single week they tell me how good my vocabulary is, how many words I use, and it's the most basic of thing that I open that email every single week. Think
makes you feel good, doesn't it?
It does. And the funny thing is, that has nothing to do with my professional development. So if you can actually think about something that you're empowering the individual, that they could even use that to pass on to their boss or their team to say, look at this great experience that I had. This is what I learned. And this is why it's relevant to our business. That is going to set the foundation for a great conversation. And then in that same breath, and if we think about all these communications, we think about it as relationship building. You don't want to deliver everything in a single instance. We want to spread things out, just as if this, I hope that this is the first of many interactions that we have with this group here. We're talking about some high level things. I hope that we can continue the conversations to get into some more of the nuts and bolts and how it's done. So the number two is in a separate communication, begin to kind of drip out all the content that they missed and why it's relevant to them. How does that apply? If you can pick a real life example and apply to why it was they didn't see this, but why it's important to them. That's the type of relevancy that we're talking about, in terms of it's something that's related to what they've already consumed, and it's something that's going to benefit them. And just being very simple in the messaging, not overly complicated, and don't forget the call to action. So oftentimes there's a button or something as simple as click here will create a lot more action. And then in that weekly cadence, try to think about, based on the information you gathered, how can we help them in a way that you demonstrate you're their advocate, and this is their learning experience, and this is what's going to help them. On the flip end, while content is very important to why people attend events, networking is the other top reason why people attend events. So take a page out of LinkedIn's book. Understand who are like-minded people in their network that you can recommend that they might think about connecting with. And because you've already covered that on the registration process, because the platform today allows you to give permission to interact with others, think about the idea of saying, hey, you may not have met so-and-so who's, the director of education at this university, who has great insights into the topic that you're very interested in. And just building on that concept of constantly, this is the value of the audience that we bring to the table. This is how it's going to help you build your professional career. This is, that old adage is, do you have 20 years experience, or do you have 1 year experience repeated 20 times? That really gets into points, 3 and 4 in helping them be successful. And then, number 5, in terms of offering something exclusive as a benefit for staying engaged, I do not like discounts. I don't like the word discount. I'm not advocating that, but you can reframe the whole conversation in platforms like Credly, who do badging. Think about, people love recognition. People love to demonstrate that they are a continuous learner in life, because it's important to them, and it's important to us as the organization that we're part of that. Think about the opportunity that as people consume more and more content, the type of badges that you could extend, and think about the opportunity to say, hey, as someone that is a loyal individual to this organization, someone that we know is continuously advocating for us and consuming this great content, we recognize the lifetime value of what you are as part of our community. So you can create a new tier of, get rid of the words early bird, and reintroduce, a different type of loyalty around that. It will go a long way, because people want to be recognized for their efforts. And this is a way of naturally, again, keeping people engaged without having to really cut into margin, or at least be perceived as a discount brand.
Mm-hmm. Rob, you've given us a lot of great nuggets today, from understanding what first data is, to understanding about integrations and the whys of why and what we can do with the data, right? And when you integrate it, and the value of that. So I appreciate it. But if there's one tip out of everything you shared with us today, if you're low on funds, you're low on time, and you're low on tech savviness, what is the one thing that that our planners here today that's joining us, or our association professionals, that they can walk away and do very easily?
Look at your own list internally. It likely has a lot more information than you think, and whether you're going to segment by seniority, by title, by functionality, that is your first step in being able to say, okay, here's my audience, here's what I think is going to be important to them, and begin that journey of getting away from the one-to-many to the one-to-one. Because as you begin those outbound communications and you get information back, that will help, that'll help shape your experience. And a close second, even though I'm supposed to say one, is don't be afraid to ask. Because admittedly, if this is not your expertise, that's okay. That's why Vanu's here. That's why I'm here. Just to give you direction. I love to build my network. So please, both Vanu and I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn to answer questions, to help provide direction. I was always made fun of as a kid for the amount of questions I asked. I've got 3 kids. My third born is unfortunately inherited that same trait where he asks 1,000 questions. But that's okay. It's yeah, I own it, but I find that it also has provided a wealth of information as well.
Well, I truly appreciate you taking the time, Rob, to join us today and give us this valuable information. I think it's a difficult conversation to have, but I think it's the beginning. I think we're all thinking about it. We're trying to figure out how to get there. And kudos to all of you for taking that step and joining us today. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope you connect with us on LinkedIn. Love to see you there. And if you're at IMAX, love to continue having that conversation in person. So definitely drop me a note. Let me know you're going to be there, and let's schedule some time together. Again, just as a reminder, we'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides today, as well as the recording. We'll also submit your attendance to ASAE, EIC, and IAEE. But thank you very much for joining us. I hope you got a lot out of this. If you have any other questions or like to chat about it, please reach out to us. Otherwise, we'll hope to see you on our next webinar. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.